Good morning. It's Thursday, February 19th, 2015, and this is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, while Obama hosts an anti-extremism conference, some Americans choose to take the fight to ISIS in Iraq. Poroshenko calls for international monitors in effort to save the rapidly crumbling truce in Ukraine. Later on the show, Israel's election videos turn nasty in the final month of campaigning. Good morning, I'm Oded Grober, and we begin in Washington, D.C., where U.S. President Barack Obama spoke yesterday before an international audience attending a summit to counter violent extremism. The three-day summit that came about following the spate of ISIS terror attacks in Australia, France, Denmark, and Libya aims to tackle the threat of jihadist terror from the ground level, working against those that inspire, radicalize, finance, and recruit potential terrorists. Later today, the community, municipal, and religious leaders will be joined by political leaders from around 60 countries and international organizations who are set to discuss military and economic solutions on the state level. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Islamic State suffered a setback yesterday after Kurdish Peshmerga fighters managed to repel a jihadist onslaught near the Iraqi city of Erbil. Joining me in the studio is Channel 2's Foreign Affairs editor, Arad Nir. Good morning to you, Arad.
Good morning, Oded. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Let's first listen to what President Barack Obama had to say, as well as Secretary of State John Kerry, and we'll take it from there.
Al-Qaeda and ISIL and groups like it are desperate for legitimacy. They try to portray themselves as religious leaders, holy warriors in defense of Islam. That's why ISIL presumes to declare itself the Islamic State. And they propagate the notion that America, and the West generally, is at war with Islam. That's how they recruit. That's how they try to radicalize young people. We must never accept the premise that they put forward, because it is a lie. Nor should we grant these terrorists the religious legitimacy that they seek. They are not religious leaders, they're terrorists.
Also joining us via Skype from Washington, D.C. is Times of Israel correspondent Rebecca Shimoni-Stoyle. Good morning, good night, actually, I should say, to you, Rebecca.
Well, good morning to you.
All right, let's begin with you, Arad. What do you think that any good can come out of a summit like this?
Firstly, Oded, allow me to comment on Barack Obama's speech yesterday. And, you know, I listened to it carefully, and I read the preceding article that he published in the Los Angeles Times regarding this summit. And funny enough, it seems as if Barack Obama is portraying himself as the protector of Islam. Funny enough, the real Islam, you know, opposed to the other people who, you know, presume themselves to be the new prophets of this religion. So it's very interesting. He avoids calling this kind of terrorism or linking it directly to Islamism. And I assume I haven't got the chance to talk still to my sources in the Prime Minister's office, but I'm sure they wouldn't have liked it. Because, you know, a high-ranking source in the Prime Minister's office have told me before that in order to clear your garden of weeds, you have to appreciate the fact that you have weeds. And they claim in Jerusalem, they claim that both Europe and the United States of America do not accept the fact that they have weeds in the garden. So, coming back to this conference that President Obama is hosting in the White House, 60 representatives of many countries, including Arab countries, etc. I think the main issue that would come out of it is how to accommodate the moderate Islam and how to help the people that, the immigrants, the second and third generations of immigrants, both in Europe and the United States, to assemble and to integrate into the Western society rather than to have
fall back.
That's it, and to be a fertile ground for those recruiters that come from these marginal parts of the society. President Obama actually exposed yesterday a pilot program that they have in the United States of community interaction between these immigrants and the old guard, if I may say so. It's currently undergoing in few U.S. cities, and are trying to export it further in the United States and to Europe as well.
Rebecca, let's turn to you now. Do you agree with that you're a little closer to the summit, at least geographically? Do you think that the Americans are refusing to recognize what this actually is?
Well, you know, this is something that the American press has called the White House on in recent days. The White House has fielded a number of direct questions asking, are you refusing to call this Islamism, or why aren't you calling this a conference on Muslim extremism when that is in fact the major focus? And the White House's answer has certainly been, well, you know, there's been other attacks carried out by other people, and they've cited, among others, a attack on a Jewish community center here in America that was carried out by a white supremacist. Now, I think the amount of questions that the administration has been getting about the nature and the topic of this conference indicate that not everybody is buying this attempt to rebrand it as sort of a general growth of extremism. And in recent days, and particularly today, White House spokesman Josh Earnest was a little bit more specific that, yes, I think his exact phrase was that we're very mindful of a fact that a particularly virulent strain of extremist ideology has tried to insert itself, note the passive voice, in the Muslim community. And so I think that the administration is definitely under a certain amount of fire from local and international press over its choice of verbiage, and is being pushed very hard to say, no, this is really actually about basically ISIS recruiting in the West.
Right. I would imagine it's not just from the press. I would imagine that the Republican Party isn't really supporting Obama on this as well.
Yes, that's fairly accurate. And in fact, a lot of the blowback has been, you know, from the Republicans, also from some of the more right-wing media, although a lot of the questions haven't been. And I think it's very interesting that as much as this could be a partisan issue, it's a sort of a general question that's been asked by kind of centrist media as well as by Republican politicians.
Of course. So, Arad, the U.S. are bombing ISIS in the Middle East. They're holding this sort of conference to deal with the recruitment of Western activists. What else could they do?
They can put boots on the ground, you know, and the United States of America have done this before, always reluctant to participate. And, you know, I can go further back in history to First World War, Second World War, and eventually this is what led to the ultimate victory of the goods, if we may call it this way. I think that currently ISIS is a real threat to Western values. ISIS causes lots of distress in various governments, and until the freedom-seeking nations join forces together and fight this evil to its roots efficiently, as it should, then it won't stop. It will carry on proliferating. You know, we see the facts on the ground. See the Peshmerga who are fighting ISIS on the ground. You just mentioned what happened in Erbil tonight, and beforehand in Kobani, the other parts of the Kurdish resistance. They can fight them, and when they are being fought, they fall apart. They are not that efficient. They have lots of skills using international social media, but other than that, they can be defeated, and they have to be defeated, but there are some things that have to be done, and one of them is boots on the ground, the one thing that Barack Obama is so reluctant to do.
Yeah, well, some are hearing your call. While Obama is hosting delegates in Washington, some Americans have chosen to take their fight against the Islamic militants to the source. The following report has the details.
As world leaders gather in Washington, D.C. for a summit on countering violent extremism, a handful of volunteers travel thousands of miles to join the small Christian militia fighting the Islamic State organization in Iraq. 28-year-old Brett, a U.S. Army veteran, is one of these volunteers.
I can't sit home and watch what's going on here, the atrocities, crucifixions, rape, sex slave, people being driven out from their towns.
The militia is called Duek Nosha, which means self-sacrifice in the ancient Assyrian language, still used by the Assyrian Christians who consider themselves the indigenous people of Iraq. The militia was officially created only 6 months ago, and according to reports, is comprised of a modest 100 fighters. While most are locals, they've gained support from Western ideologists.
What I want to accomplish is to get Daesh out of this country. Destroy them, basically.
These volunteers are so driven that they do not even ask for the smallest compensation in return, only for the eradication of the Islamic State organization.
I'm not being paid at all. I'm being fed, and I'm being, armed and clothed and everything. But any gear that I need, I'm paying out of pocket. This is all money that I saved for this effort myself, because I believe in the cause a lot, so I'm willing to sacrifice everything.
The Christian militia does not fear its enemy. The real cause of concern for the volunteers is the global community's incompetence in handling the ever-growing threat of the Islamic State.
I'd like to see all the communities working together, people from every race and religious background to defeat ISIS, which is really a menace, not only in this part of the world, but as you know, they're threatening people in Europe and North America. It's a world problem, and we all need to get involved.
Yeah. Rebecca, is this the beginning of a phenomenon, or is it too early to say still?
Well, if Aradnir talked about the phenomenon of the U.S. getting involved in World War I and World War II, this certainly reminds me of the Abraham Lincoln brigades getting involved in the Spanish Civil War. I think it's an interesting
You're going even further back, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting comparison because on one hand you could say, was that really the beginning of the United States fight against fascism? Like, actually, yes, it was. Right. But looking at it in a more narrow sense, did this mean that the United States was going to get involved on behalf of the socialist militias in Spain? No, it was not. I think that it could be indicative of a public sentiment. And I think that over the summer and in the ensuing months, we've really seen a growing awareness among Americans, particularly politically literate Americans, over what is happening to minority communities in Iraq and Syria. And I think there is a growing sense that this is not just an international complication, that this is not just simply a question of intervention because of, oil interests or geopolitical interests, but there is a sense of moral outrage that I think has become increasingly commonplace among Americans in the past 6 months.
I see, of course. Arad, do you think these are just a bunch of crazies, or is it a suitable answer to ISIS and their attempts to recruit in the West?
Well, this is definitely not the answer. This may be a tiny little part of the ultimate answer. This may be just the beginning of the stream, but eventually there has to be a presidential decision to put an end to this phenomenon called ISIS.
Yeah. Thank you, Arad. Thank you so much, Rebecca, as well.
Yeah.
Moving to Europe now, European leaders were reluctant to write off the recently agreed upon East Ukraine ceasefire deal yesterday, but with ongoing reports of clashes between Kiev troops and pro-Russian separatists, they may not be far from thinking about the next steps. Though Ukrainian military forces began pulling out of some of the flashpoint areas, the rebels had yet to do so, prompting NATO to call on Putin to order his troops out of Ukraine and to respect the Minsk agreement. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko spoke to the leaders of France, Germany, and Russia yesterday, after which he called for a UN mandate peacekeeping force to step in and monitor the ceasefire. Arad, you're still with us on this matter as well, but let's first watch the report, come back and hear from you.
Potential relief for residents of embattled East Ukraine Wednesday as the Ukrainian army began pulling out of a town under siege by Russian-backed separatists.
Today, Ukraine's armed forces are undertaking an organized withdrawal of units involved in the anti-terror operation from the town of Debetslava. Currently, near 80% of Ukrainian units have left that sector.
Rebel forces had fought their way into Debaltsev on Tuesday, violating a ceasefire agreement which came into effect just 2 days before. But NATO Secretary General on Wednesday accused pro-Russian separatists of threatening the Minsk Accord, brokered by Germany, France, Ukraine and Russia.
We have seen that the ceasefire has not been respected. We have seen the separatists in eastern Ukraine making advances, especially in and around Debaltseve.
This statement was backed by European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini.
Let me stress that not only the European Union but the whole international community, with the resolution that was adopted yesterday in the UN Security Council, stands for a full implementation of all points of the Minsk agreement reached.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the first anniversary of the Maidan massacre was marked on Wednesday. The event commemorates the killing of an estimated 100 protesters by riot police in central Kiev. Following the bloody events in the Maidan uprising, opposition leaders signed a peace pact mediated by the European Union on February 21st, another agreement made in the hopes of ending the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Also joining us live via Skype from Kiev is a freelance journalist, Vladimir Solohab. Good morning to you, Vladimir.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Tell me a little bit. What's happening in your part of the world?
Well, the situation is obviously very tense, as you have heard in your report. The town of Debaltseve, which is technically on the Ukrainian side of the conflict zone, and according to the Minsk agreement, which was reached last week, should have been controlled by Ukrainian forces. However, it was a very, since Debaltseve is a strategic railroad hub, it was a very lucrative portion of the eastern Ukraine for the separatists, and fighting for this town has been raging for several weeks. And yesterday, finally, the Ukrainian president ordered Ukrainian troops to withdraw from Debaltseve, and this decision was so important and so valuable that the president himself flew to the eastern Ukraine and went to the town of Artemivsk, which is some 70 kilometers from Debaltseve, to meet and greet the troops who were withdrawing from Debaltseve.
What does that mean? Does that mean that he gave up on his presence there?
Well, it looks like most likely that he was heavily pressured by the Western countries, mainly most likely by France and Germany, who were part of the negotiating process in Minsk, to take away the Ukrainian troops because they were almost entirely encircled by the Russia-backed separatists. They were cut off from any supplies of food, medical supplies, ammunition. They were running out of everything, and sooner or later they would have been defeated. So in order to save people's lives, these troops were ordered to withdraw from Debaltseve.
I see. Arad, give me your take on this.
Well, I totally agree with Vladimir, who just mentioned the strategic importance of this city, Debaltseve. Now, if we try to visualize the map, it's just in between the southern region of Donetsk and the upper region of Lugansk, which are held by the pro-Russian rebels or separatists, as you want to call them. And this gives them a straight piece of land that can be attached to Russia. This actually changes the whole situation, and because of this, there's much more optimism in the West that this ceasefire, who've been crippling for the last 5 days since it took into effect on Sunday, will sustain from now on. See, this agreement was signed exactly a week ago, last Thursday in Minsk, Minsk 2, and since then, a few dozen Ukrainian troops were killed, about 100 wounded in this fight over this particular city. Now, when President Poroshenko have taken this strategic decision to leave and withdraw, it leaves this piece of land under the influence of Putin. The main question is, will it suffice? Well, I assume that it will suffice at least for some time. That's it. Yeah. At least for some time. And Putin, from time to time, will use his proxies in order to check the waters and to check the water and
poke at the Ukraine.
Yeah, that's it, and see how far he can go. So the threat of sanctions is still there.
That man's hunger knows no satisfying.
No satisfy, and even no deterrence, funny enough, because Putin knows that at least Merkel and also François Hollande, they're not so eager to put these sanctions into effect, let alone, coming back to what we've discussed regarding ISIS, getting involved militarily.
Of course.
So at the end of the day, I think that they will come into a sort of understanding of separating Ukraine to various influential regions, the pro-Russian influential region and the pro-West, pro-European influential region to the West.
Right. Vladimir, back to you. The people in the region, what are their sentiments?
Well, obviously, the civilians who were still in the Debaltseve, and according to various sources which were actually quoted in the Oversee report, at the time of the siege, there was still more than 2,000 civilians. Obviously, all of them were hiding in bomb shelters and cellars. They are quite happy that the Ukrainian troops withdrew from their town.
They just want peace and quiet at this point.
Absolutely, yeah, because that means that no more fighting, no more shelling, no more bombings. However, and that is the sentiment which is quite popular, if you can say so, across the entire region. People are tired of the war, are tired of the fighting, which has been raging for many months in eastern Ukraine. And to some of them, it frankly doesn't really matter who controls the territory after all. They just want peace.
Right. And what do you think about where Putin is really on this? Will he try, as Arad suggested, to cross that line and check the Ukraine every now and then?
Well, most likely his objective is to have this frozen conflict zone, which would separate basically Russia from Ukraine, and because the mere objective of starting this entire crisis and stirring the crisis in Ukraine were the fears of Putin of Ukraine getting closer to Europe, getting closer ties with NATO, and that is what frightens him the most. So he would like to see this conflict frozen buffer zone between Ukraine and Russia, and most likely his objective to have this conflict zone existing for a long time.
Right. Arad, Putin on the one hand, Poroshenko on the other, what do they stand to lose if this conflict does go on?
Well, Putin loses, I mean, personally, very little, because he's very strong at home, and you know,
on the global scene, maybe.
Well, Again, it's a matter of sanctions. They want me military intervention in Ukraine. I can put some money on it. I'll feel quite safe to do it. At least not in the foreseeable future. You see, I'm retracting a bit already.
When money is involved,
but you know, it's the sanctions. It's only the sanctions, and Putin seems not to care. Even though there are some who claim that Putin is not as strong as it seems to be within Russia. But this is a marginal thought for the moment, and I don't see any sustainability.
The Russian public, do they feel strongly one way or another about this? The Russian public.
Well, in Russia you don't
that
speak
went
about
over my head a little bit.
You don't speak about Russian public. Definitely not public opinion. The Russian public opinion is Putin's opinion. This is how it is working now, and this is quite opposed to what's happening on the Ukraine side, because at least on the western part of Ukraine, where Poroshenko comes from, in Kiev, they are trying to implement at the moment some Western values, some Western democratic values. And this is exactly what Putin doesn't want. So it's really this buffer zone that he wants to create. The question is whether there will be an agreement between him and the European Union, NATO, and the United States to divide Ukraine. You know what? In the same model that Germany was divided after Second World War, eastern part and Eastern leaning, and western part Western leaning.
And we all know what eventually happened there.
That's quite
Although
true.
It took some time.
That's quite true. And you know, if we look, we visualize the map again. You know, from the eastern part of Ukraine, he'd probably want to stretch a whole piece of land, this new Russia of his, up down to the Crimean island and the Crimean Peninsula down there, and eventually he may be satisfied with it. So if the Europeans are talking about European neighborhood policy, in which they incorporated Ukraine in order to have a very friendly neighborhood to their state, then Putin wants his own new Russia policy in order to have this buffer zone, as was described earlier.
Good fences make good neighbors. Vladimir, last question to you. The most important one, I think. Do you think that the truce will hold with this new arrangement?
Well, there's actually a new twist to Ukrainian ceasefire. Yesterday, after President Poroshenko came back from the east, there was an emergency meeting of National Security and Defense Council, during which the council made a decision to address the EU and the United Nations to send the peacekeeping troops to monitor the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. So this new development might bring some more hope we
certainly hope so, that it will hold at this point. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you, Elad, as well. Still coming up next on the show, a new study reveals rising levels of plastics in the oceans. We'll hear more about it when we come back. But first, some more of this morning's headlines. Welcome back to our morning edition at I-24 News. Thank you for watching. It's time to say hello and good morning to Anthony Grant, who joins us daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
Good morning to you. Yes, look at that dramatic. Don't look.
It's
very
beautiful.
dramatic. Yeah,
it's great. I love it. I mean, when we're inside, you know.
Yeah, it's very dramatic. It kind of echoes sort of the political finger pointing that's going on in some quarters of the world. I want to talk about just quickly Argentina.
Yep.
It was mentioned
it's quite messy.
It's quite messy, yeah. They have good stakes, I hear. But in the meantime, the Argentinian president says that the United States and Israel are now meddling in the country. This was reported here in Ynet News. Basically, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner says that the U.S. and Israel are intervening in Argentina's business ahead of a protest by attorneys investigating the death of state prosecutor Alberto Nisman in the alleged cover-up by Kirchner of Iranian collusion in the 1994 bombing of a Jewish center. So finger pointing is going on a lot.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's not that I totally disagree that the U.S. and Israel can be meddling countries, but it doesn't look good when what you're doing is finger pointing.
Right. I mean, the U.S. did offer assistance with the investigation, but offering assistance and meddling are, arguably two different things. So again,
maybe it's just different phrasing.
Different phrasing, yeah. Anyway, dramatic times for the embattled president, we could say, of Argentina. Shifting focus over to this part of the world, The Independent reports on a story related to, of course, the Mediterranean Sea out there, saying that ISIS is planning to use immigration boats from Libya to cause terror in Europe.
Well, from the way the sea looks from here, they better be some bigger boats than this.
Yeah, the picture, I don't know if that corresponds quite with the headline, but what they're basically talking about here is a lot of illegal immigration boats do tend to leave from the Libyan coast, headed to European shores.
Right, the distance between Libya and Italy, we should say, is quite, not vast.
Not vast. And of course, with the recent ISIS brutality in Libya, we know that they at least have some kind of a foothold there. So it's something to be wary of. I think that people are on the policy-making level aware of it.
Well, when they hit the south of Italy, I think it's the mafia they meet there might make them turn around. So there's still that to rely on.
Sounds like Godzilla versus Mothra. But anyway, speaking of Libya again, on a different level, a more domestic level, Al Arabiya reports that an Islamist militia, not ISIS, but an Islamist militia has struck an airport in Libya from the sky. And this is kind of a disturbing development as well. Basically, an Islamist militia based in Tripoli, which is a major city, on Tuesday carried out the strike on a western Libyan town that's allied with a rival force, which is headed by a renegade general, this Khalifa al-Haftar. So this is an escalation with this militia using
I don't like these
aerial.
Words. Renegade general. It doesn't sound good.
Doesn't sound, and Libya doesn't sound too good these days. It's really a fractured country.
How was this attack carried out?
Some kind of air plane, apparently, or some
drone,
kind of,
or a civilian drone, or something of that sort.
Well, I'm not sure what the exact choice of equipment was. It did result in a bombardment of this airport and cancellation of passenger flights, at least a couple. So again, as far as making travel plans in Libya, probably not a good idea. With embassies closing right and left. Yeah. Good idea. Stick to Jaffa. Interesting headline from a paper, or I should say an online news source called Now Lebanon, which is a bit apocryphal, but I want to look at the headline quickly. It says Hezbollah and Iran advance and incur losses in Daraa, which is a town in Syria. This is an article which describes Free Syrian Army commanders are describing conditions on the battlefield in southern Syria. It's hard to say if it's propaganda or fact, but basically this is a piece that's openly saying that Iran is there in Syria and basically slamming what Hezbollah and Iran to a certain extent are, through their propaganda, claiming. Right. Yeah. So again, kind of murky stuff, but...
and does this publication, are they associated with a certain political
If they
group?
are, I don't think it's officially. I mean, usually they have a pretty above-board kind of reporting, so I wouldn't say it's like it's not openly an instrument of any one particular faction. So interesting to see how they describe at least the conditions on the ground, which are troubled to say the least.
Yeah, and have been for a while.
For a while, and as with this weather coming up, it's probably going to get even murkier. Murky in
Although
Ukraine.
Nobody likes to fight in the rain, so at least maybe the fire will cease.
I think the British like to fight in the rain because they're so used to it.
Who can say what the British like?
I don't know. Maybe Putin. Pravda, a paper from the past which still exists, at least online. In an article in Pravda, Putin said that the West is already shipping arms to Ukraine. So again, Pravda, you could say, how legitimate of a source is it? Well, it's still Pravda, and basically by saying that, Putin is kind of upping the ante, and basically, it's giving the West an opportunity to shoot down that comment. But I don't know if anyone has at this point.
Yeah, we discussed earlier on the show. We discussed the situation in the Ukraine and what's going on there, and Putin he always wants more. It seems, and
he's a taker. You know, so speaking of taking, let's talk about Switzerland for a moment. HSBC, Embattled Bank, their Geneva unit was raided yesterday, I believe, in this ongoing money laundering probe. HSBC has come under a lot of scrutiny since there was this leak on February 8th of how the Swiss unit handled accounts for tax evaders and criminals, basically.
All around the world.
All around the world.
Some big names.
Yes, from people from all sorts of countries, from the U.S. to Israel to who knows what else.
And from all sorts, you know, from
Argentina.
And with all kinds of professions and from all different...
all economic spheres, and we're talking about a lot of money. So if that money has been dodging the requisite taxation, then I think HSBC is going to find itself in a lot of hot water.
These are people that put their trust in HSBC.
Yes.
I mean, sure, they were trying to avoid paying taxes, but they had some sort of deal with HSBC, and the fact that it leaked, I don't know what that says about where HSBC is currently.
Yeah, well, I mean, kudos to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, which actually sort of broke the leak. So, I mean, I'm sure they're not going to open up an account at HSBC anytime soon, but interesting times for the financial world, to say the least. Speaking of that, if there's time for Greece, very quickly.
Please.
Big Greek newspaper, Kathy Marini, reports
There's always time for Greece.
Oh, we should hope so. Yes. The economic crisis there continues, and of course, today there's going to be more meetings with the Euro Group, which is sort of the finance ministers of the European Union member countries, and they're going to be talking about Athens, the request of Athens to extend their rescue bailout deal, which at first the Greeks said they didn't want to do. They want to kind of write new rules. So now they might be backstepping a little bit. They do need cash pretty desperately ahead of it.
It doesn't look like they have a choice, you know?
They don't have much of a choice, but they also have a hard sell domestically because this left-wing government was elected on the basis
that they were going to
they're
avoid.
going to do things their own way.
Right.
So today is going to be in Brussels an interesting day to see what turns out from those meetings.
The worst-case scenario, as far as they're concerned, is that they'll that request will be denied, and then they'll look the worst. You know, that they say they won't ask for it, then they did ask for it, then they end up not getting it.
Yeah, and there's already
an option?
At this point, I would say there's many options on the table with those discussions. We know that Syriza has already flip-flopped regarding the privatization of the Piraeus port, which they said they were sort of not going to proceed with, but now they are. And for a kind of a socialist government to say they're going to facilitate the privatization of the country's largest economic asset is already a bit of a sign that they're flexible, because I think they kind of have to be at this point. That's what many people are saying.
Last but not least?
There was a brawl in the Turkish parliament the other day. I think about 5 Turkish lawmakers were wounded in this. Today's Zaman, which is an opposition paper in Turkey, has a lovely picture of a lawmaker on the parliament floor. You know, things have gotten testy in the Turkish parliament in the past, so it's not a first.
They have a nice carpet.
Very nice carpets, yes. That we can be assured. Anyway.
Tony, thanks so much.
Thank you.
We're now joined in the studio by environmental journalist Netta Achituv. Hi, Netta. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Oded.
How do you like this environment?
I love it. It's nature in all its glory.
Yeah, we're
I only think about the homeless people and cats in the streets, but putting that aside, I love it.
Such a kind person, loving person. We could all learn a thing or two from you. Yeah. What are you bringing us?
Well, so last week, it's like really exciting, but Science, one of the 3 best scientific journals in the world, published this article about. They tried to do the most ambitious, try until today to find out how much plastic is there in the oceans. It's a huge, huge problem, and there are tons of plastic. And they did this really sophisticated calculation, taking data from all over the world, from 192 countries that have coastlines, and actually found out that there are 8 million metric tons of plastic in 2010, and that it cost us, the humankind, $13 billion, in tourism, animals, wildlife, that is
So what? So this is mostly plastic?
Yes, so this is mostly plastic. It's crazy what's going on there. Actually, you know, the plastic, it's not biodegradable. So what happens is the sun and the sea together,
Right.
it comes into very, very tiny pieces. It's impossible to clean it.
To get rid of.
Yeah, and just impossible. So
It'll
we have
stay
to
there
live with
forever.
it. Yeah, the only way that you
So
can do something about it is to improve your waste management ashore.
Right, so
but
it's
not in
only
the ocean.
looking at our future waste, not at everything
Yes.
that we've already dumped in the ocean.
Exactly. So
So
they
the
found out that
rising sea levels could be just because of plastic.
yeah, might be. Everything could be because of the, you know, amounts of plastic there. They found out that it's like 5 plastic bags, you know, filled in with all the plastic you can imagine for every foot of coastline in the world, for every 30 centimeters
Wow.
of coastline in the world.
That's
And-
something that I
yes.
can relate to. You know, when you said 8 metric tons, I was like, I don't really know if that's a lot or a little, but when you put it that way, that's quite
and
a
in
lot.
2025 it will be 10 plastic bags for every 30 centimeters. Imagine that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we have a report on this, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
Let's,
the report is about the gyro. It's the plastic, you know, there's like a plastic area in the ocean where the currents meet each other, opposite currents meet. So let's
take a look. Come back to you.
The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a swirling mass of marine debris, a plastic soup of discarded bags and bottles in the northeast of the Pacific Ocean, estimated to be 6 times the area of France. It's the world's biggest landfill and consists of disintegrated plastic and other discarded waste which is forever increasing in size. Because it's confined within the currents of the North Pacific Gyre, an immense vortex and meeting point of oceanic currents, it rotates around an area between Hawaii and the North American mainland. 4 other marine vortices in the world's oceans also hold millions of tons of polluting debris. The debris, held both on the surface and to a depth of many meters in the water column beneath, can have unexpected environmental consequences. Marine mammals, turtles and seabirds can mistake decomposing plastic for plankton, their basic form of nourishment, and ingest them, harming their digestive systems. In the North Pacific, this mass of rubbish is a breeding ground for a species of wingless water insect, the Halobates sericius. This creature needs a landmass of submerged rocks or vegetation on which to lay its eggs, and the garbage patch provides the perfect conditions. The water-skating Halobates may prove an unexpected source of food for crabs, fish and small seabirds, but it's also a predator feeding on plankton and fish eggs. And as it proliferates, so it threatens to destabilize the fine balance of the entire oceanic ecosystem.
Netta, the size of this is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, yeah. It's bigger than Texas. It's, 8 times the, it's really unbelievable.
So how long till we until we put people there?
It's a bit hard because, you know, the ocean, it floats. Some of them go to the bottom. Some of them, it's... but yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe we should...
I mean, it's there to stay. We can't get rid of it now.
Who had a better idea? William Farrell.
What did he
This
say?
is for you, the cultural guy. He has this initiative. It's called RAW, and he takes plastic that has been taken out of the ocean and makes fabrics out of it. He has like this whole line. He's amazing, this guy.
So we could we could definitely clothe all of the world's population with what's floating there.
Yes. Another interesting thing in this science scientific journal, that they made a list of the 20 most plastic polluting countries, and China is in first place, and the USA is in the 20th place, but USA has more plastic garbage than China, but it has a better waste management system, so less plastic is, thrown into the ocean. And 80% of the plastic in the ocean is from ashore, and 20% is from cargo ships. You know, the famous Lego ship that has been... that sank
dumped a hell of a lot of Legos to the ocean, right?
Yeah, now in the Netherlands, people are finding, Lego pieces.
There was also that shipment of rubber duckies. That's something that floated off somewhere.
Exactly, and it's also a source of inspiration for artists, for documentaries, for many people. So we can see, I think there is a trailer we can see of one of the best films done about it. It's called Plasticized.
I think we'll have to skip that. This one. Wow,
really
that's really heart-wrenching.
Yeah,
that's
awful. The turtles. So there is a good film called Plasticized that made about it. Plastic Soup, World of Plastic. Many films made about it because it's also kind of photogenic.
It's photogenic and heart-wrenching.
Yes.
Oh well, Netta.
Sorry to
we started off well,
but
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still coming up later on the show, the gloves are off in the final month of campaigning towards the elections here in Israel. But first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Welcome back. It's still Thursday, February 19th, 2015. This is still the morning edition. I'm still Oded Grober. Thank you so much for staying with us. The 25 days left till the elections in Israel. Campaign videos are taking a rather nasty approach. I-24 News senior editor Ruti Sinai, known for her nasty approach, is here to help us examine this matter and see if this approach is working or not. It might be. You're writing it down. All right. Ruti, let's first take a look at a report we have. Come back and hear all about it from you.
As Israel enters the final month of its election season, the buzz over viral campaigns is louder and stronger than ever. In the past weeks, the politicians dusted off their acting skills and provided humorous insights into their political agenda. After portraying a kindergarten teacher and a babysitter, Prime Minister Netanyahu joked about the supposedly marginal issues of his and his wife's alleged hedonistic lifestyle and expensive household. In the latest video, produced by Netanyahu's Likud party, it continues to lash out at Labour Party leader Isaac Bougie Herzog and especially his partner to the Zionist Union, Tzipi Livni, in an attempt to deter the Labour Party voters. Meanwhile, the Labour Party is working hard on breaking the soft image of its leader Herzog. After adding a famous publicist to the campaign, following criticism it wasn't generating enough attention, a new video hit the news feeds. The nasal voice of Herzog, which many claim is doing him the most harm in his attempt to be elected as premier, was altered in this clip to prove a point. And on the other side of the political map, the Jewish West Bank settlers have come under fire. A video dubbed The Eternal Jew, the same name as that given to a 1940 Nazi propaganda movie, was published. Consisting of anti-Semitic motives, left-wing organizations are depicted in it as Nazi Germany-era caricatures pleasing their anti-Semitic European masters for money. After causing a public storm and condemned by Netanyahu himself, the regional Samaria county denied knowledge of its existence. But according to Israeli Haaretz newspaper, the clip was presented by the Samaria Settlers Council to the county committee, and most of its elements were approved. As election date gets closer, it appears both sides are taking off the gloves and shifting into high gear, trying to take over the primary sources of news these days, social media.
Ruthie, it seems that with social media being like the tool for these elections, that all bets are off, anything the gloves goes. Are off, anything goes.
Yeah. Look, if it weren't so serious, some of these campaign clips are fairly amusing and creative, I have to say.
True.
There's two problems with them. One is that some of them are really beyond the pale, like the one we saw with the settlers, with the Nazi motifs. Jew. Yeah, the Eternal Jew, and Herr Stirner and these horrible anti-Semitic motifs. The other problem with the clips is that they really they distort the public discourse. In other words, the discourse is about the clips rather than about issues.
Right.
And most of the clips are not about issues. They are to an extent about the security issue, but again, it's not anything that's discussed. It's just, it's to frighten, Netanyahu and Likud are saying
the ISIS.
Exactly. If you vote for the center-left, you're voting essentially for Islamic State. Very simplistic, very black and white, and none of these issues are black and white. There's so much gray in the middle.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the nature of elections in some way, but in Israel, Israel, the culture of debate, which, not just debate between the two main contenders, but in generally debate, is not nearly as well developed as it is in other countries, the United States being one, Europe being another. And, the media has really been giving the politicians a pass, letting them, take this...
Talking about these videos,
right, instead of talking about issues.
Instead about the topics themselves.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is, and that is the ultimate question that the candidates are asking their advisors, is do these videos work?
It's a question of who you ask and who your pollster is, and so on. What's more interesting, by the way, if I may shift the question a bit sideways, is we had a controller's report coming out 2 days ago with some serious allegations of impropriety in terms of the Prime Minister's spending, the household expenses, and a poll that came out yesterday shows that it hasn't done him any harm.
Nobody cares.
No, really, nobody cares. So, I think the bottom line is that, if you're going to vote Likud or the right, you're going to vote Likud or the right, and if you're going to vote center-left, I mean, you may budge, within your bloc, but you're not from one party to another.
No, I guess you're not going to change, right?
Yeah,
if you plan to vote Likud, you're not suddenly going to vote for Bougie because you found out that the Netanyahu who's called the electrician in.
Right, and because he has a cuter clip.
Right, right. But I guess what could happen is that you'd become so upset, so fed up with the situation that you won't go and vote.
Yes, I think that is the danger.
For,
absolutely, I think that is a danger. And the fewer people who vote, the more it benefits the right generally in past Israeli elections.
You think that even in this upcoming election,
lower turnout basically benefits the right because you have on the right an electorate that is more either more committed or more organized.
With belief.
Yes, exactly. More ideological, let's put it that way. And they're more organized. The ultra-Orthodox parties and some of these other parties basically, bus people, take people, they bring them in families and groups and neighborhoods, whatever. So
the left is one person per car.
I would say that's not a bad, except in the Arab sector. In the Arab sector, it's also very organized families, tribes.
It's interesting because of this merger of the Arab parties. We're not seeing much of the Arabs taking part in this game of campaigning, right?
I think it's a it's probably the most interesting, or one of the most interesting, phenomena in this very interesting campaign. I have to say, it's not been a dull moment. There's not been a dull moment. The Arabs, ironically, they had to unite because of Lieberman, who's the greatest nemesis, Foreign Minister Victor Lieberman, who
called for some drastic moves when it comes
against
to
the Arabs. What he did is he passed a law in the previous Knesset raising the electoral threshold, which showed the Arabs that if they didn't unite, they risk not getting in at all. So they united, which is something that nobody has managed to do in 60-some years of Israeli independence. So,
and now the polls show that they could be the third largest party.
Absolutely. They may well get 12 out of the 120 seats in the Knesset, which would make them, the third largest party, which is, incredible irony. Almost the tiebreaker between left and right.
Right, but they're still saying that pretty much it's obvious that whatever coalition will be built, they'll stay out of it.
Probably, yeah. Unfortunately, we're not yet at a place where Israelis would be willing to accept, more than one token, perhaps, Arab minister in the cabinet.
See, the interesting part, the way I see it, it's not just that the Israeli Jews won't have them. It's that they themselves are saying we're staying out.
I think under certain circumstances they might want to come in. Obviously depending on who's the head of this next government. No, I think there's a certain degree of maturity. That was true. Initially, it wasn't true.
At this point, you're thinking they're paying lip service to their voters?
I think to a degree, yes. Because I think they understand it doesn't serve them to be always in the opposition.
Right. Uti, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now we're joined again by the one and only Anthony Grant for the viral spiral that is the web review. What do you think? Ruti turned out not to be nasty at all. I was bad-mouthing her for no reason.
She did talk about the media giving politicians a pass.
Right,
and so who does that bring to mind?
Who?
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Joe.
Yeah, I knew I should have known you were going to go there.
Vice President.
The Vice President of the United States.
You get the word vice?
Vice.
Well,
nice.
he wasn't exactly
See, you're
being,
a little nasty after all.
Yeah, he was not exactly being virtuous when he was snuggling and sniffing the hair of Defense Secretary Ashton Carter's wife, Stephanie.
I have to say, when I first heard about this, I just heard about it, and I thought, well, it sounds like no big deal. It couldn't have been that bad.
And then you saw the evidence.
And then I saw the video, and I was like, oh my God.
It's not the first time, by the way.
Yeah.
He sniffed her hair before?
Not with her. He had he's had a bunch of these things. He had a woman biker.
Yeah.
He had a woman biker on his lap the other day at some.
I saw some picture online that said 50 Shades of Biden.
Ooh, I think one shade is more than enough for most of the American public.
He tried to kiss a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah, it was a little awkward. Yeah. It was a little awkward.
They do things a little differently in Delaware, you know. So anyway, more power or less to Biden. Shifting back to Israel,
and it was really weird there. Okay, let's move on.
You can check it out online if you must. And anyway, little Nadav G. Can't pronounce his last name, 16-year-old. He is the talent of the Rising Star Israeli show, which is now sending him off to compete in Eurovision in May. So for Eurovision fans, of which you are a huge one,
of course,
this is exciting news for Israel.
What is the problem with pronouncing his name? Gwedge.
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 Gwedge?
Gwedge.
You don't think it's Gwedge?
Gwedge. It's something, I guess there's a French sound to it.
Is it French sound? Well,
so he's going to Vienna for the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. You know, unknown, I guess, I don't know.
He could become, look, ABBA got their start at Eurovision. Olivia Newton-John, a lot of famous people started off, they weren't famous, but Eurovision made them so maybe Nadav is going to be the next.
What do you think of his chances? Did you hear him sing?
I did not yet, but I'm looking forward to. Because I'm sure he's got a fresh, young voice. And listen.
The next Mike Brandt.
The next Mike Brandt, perhaps.
Maybe.
Which 810 Fox is working on a film about him. Did you know that? Yes, exciting stuff. Yoko Ono, back in the news.
Yeah.
Yes, that's been announced that she's going to be having a retrospective at the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, in New York, coming up, I believe, in May. And it's going to be called Yoko Ono, one-woman show from the 1960-1971 period. Now, it must be said that she did have an unofficial exhibit at MoMA in 1971 called Museum of Modern Fart. Yes. So we don't know how the next upcoming one is going to relate to that one, but you know.
What do you think of her of her work as an artist?
I mean, of her oeuvre? Well, I think you know, when you're in the shadow of John Lennon.
I don't want to say what I think, so I'm asking you.
I would say I admire the effort.
We know what you think, Oded.
Really?
I think
is that obvious?
I admire the effort. As far as the result, I think she's got a long way toward being a Picasso. But you know,
I think that it shows, like, she married John. You know, she got that break, and then she just kept working. She really tried hard. She gets an A for effort.
Yeah,
that's for sure. But I don't know if she needs a retrospective in the MoMA.
The vision seems a little scattered. But listen, she is a personality, and it will bring people into the museum, and that'll be a good for culture generally, one could say. Zonda Rhodes. The fashion great was recently made a dame at Buckingham of the United Kingdom, I guess. There she is. This is interesting stuff because she dressed everyone from Jackie O. Yeah, Jackie Onassis to Princess Diana, and a big fashion icon in the UK, kind of up there with Vivienne Westwood. So still rocking the pink hair look.
Nice.
So it's nice to see.
I like her style.
I wonder what the Queen thought of that.
Yeah. You know, I know the Queen favors bigger hats, so I don't know.
Is there a chance that we'll see the Queen with a similar hairdo?
I sure would like to. Well, which Queen? Elton John, maybe. Anyway, speaking of
real
Queens,
Queen.
Elton John. Geraldo Rivera. Yes.
Ooh, is he still around?
He's still. He is
the man in the mustache.
Yes, there he is. He slammed hip hop as being very destructive culturally.
Well,
I think that the Geraldo Rivera is very destructive.
Exactly.
I gotta say, I don't know why he decided to weigh in on this raging debate at this particular time, but he has.
Didn't he have that picture that leaked?
The Instagram picture?
Yeah.
He leaked it himself. I mean, he was like, see me roar, topless. He didn't really want to see that. That was kind of destructive culturally. Yes. Anyway, Geraldo on Fox News always keeping it interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, guess who's killing the gram, which is slang for being really successful on Instagram.
Okay.
Amber Rose.
Killing the gram.
Yeah, she's become like the next Kardashian, you could say, in her provocative poses. Of course, she is mother of one, wholesome lady, and she is rocking a snakeskin-esque bikini in Trinidad for Carnival. So it's not all about Venice and New Orleans, it's also in Trinidad.
Last but not least,
Kim Kardashian was allegedly having a cleavage stylist assist her with her assets.
Pardon?
Yes, a cleavage stylist. Her rep has denied the charge.
I gotta get you one of those.
We could all use one of those now and again.
Thanks, Tony.
No problem.
Thanks, Ruthie.
Sure.
Still coming up later on the show, everything you wanted to know about the 2015 Oscars and all the cleavage stylists there. But first, some more of this morning's headlines. Are back, and joining us in the studio now is I-24 News sports analyst Yoav Borovich. Good morning, Yoav.
Good morning, Oded.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great.
Good to hear. What are we talking about? We're talking about some less than wonderful subjects, unfortunately.
Yes, sometimes it happens in sports, but it's a very big story. Actually, it's a minor, small incident that just became huge in the media. And rightfully so, because what happened is that 2 days ago, Chelsea played a Champions League game in Paris against Paris Saint-Germain. It was a very big game. With Chelsea came a few thousand fans, and they were riding the metro on the way to the stadium.
It was in Paris again?
It was in Paris, yeah. And a black guy was about to enter the metro, and the Chelsea fans, a group of white fans, were just pushing him off, and continuously. They tried again, pushing him off again. And then they sang a song, we're racist, and we love it, and we like it. And we know, if we look
So we know that this isn't really... let's watch the clip and judge for ourselves. So this isn't because he's a Paris Saint-Germain fan.
No, he's not a fan. He was just a guy, probably going home from work. But they wouldn't let him in. He tried a few times. He tried quite a few, 4 or 5 times at least. They wouldn't let him in. Now, nobody talked about it that night, but when the footage came out the day after, yesterday, it became just like it's grabbing all the headlines in England and in France. And now the question is, what do you do? Because those fans are back in England. Now, the Scotland Yard is already investigating. Now, Chelsea says Chelsea, the football club, they say they're embarrassed and they don't want those fans. They'll be banning those fans. But if you're asking me and other people, those fans should be, it's more than just being banned of football matches, for what they did. Now, obviously, they say some of them are drunk, but it's totally irrelevant. But the question is whether you put them in jail, and in what jail, or if you persecute them for something like that or not.
And I guess the real problem is not just this group of fans, because for many years, football fans have had a bad rap for getting drunk, for being violent, and in recent years, I think football's been trying to rebrand itself, the beautiful game, and with zero tolerance towards racism, and then this comes and pretty much wrecks it all.
Exactly, because in England for years, for decades, football was associated with violence, with homophobia, with racism. In the last 20 years, they really treated it from the core as a more of an upper middle class kind of, because tickets are extremely expensive. More women come to games, more families. But with what happened now, it was really bad. And in Chelsea, their fans were associated for years with racism, and now they try to clean up their act. You know, they have a Russian billionaire owner, Roman Abramovich. They're a very successful team, very rich team. But when we see those diehard fans, you know, the fans who go with the team, the follow the team, go all the way to Paris, and in Paris they do something like that, allow themselves to behave in such a disgusting manner. This is an embarrassment not only to Chelsea but to Britain. You know, in England it became just a huge story, and I'm sure something will be done, because, you know, and it just shows you, just like a small incident somebody takes, it shows us also about today's media. You know, somebody takes a picture,
it can blow up.
It's a much bigger, it becomes much bigger than the game itself.
Something that otherwise it would have gotten very little attention.
Yeah, think about it. If there's no footage, it becomes a hearsay. Oh, didn't. Yeah, it's
quite troubling. But let's move on. What else do you have to tell us?
Okay, another story that is actually larger in scope and troubling is the Qatar World Cup story.
Yeah,
because Qatar,
troubling, I think, from day one.
Yes, because Qatar got to host, and in a very surprising fashion, they got to host the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah.
And they're just, from the get-go, there are a lot of accusations, a lot of, you know, people
bribes maybe handed out.
And actually FIFA investigated through an American investigator, Michael Garcia, and he found out that the Qatari president of Qatar Soccer and the vice president of FIFA did give money to people who voted. But the guy was not part of the bidding committee, of the official Qatari bidding committee. So the bidding committee, who are actually in charge of the World Cup, they say, this guy has nothing to do with us. You know, he's Qatari and we're Qatari, but we're not the same entity. So for that matter, what
they give him the money for?
So yeah, exactly.
Charity.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows what for. But you know, with corruption, many times corruption could be very easy, because both parties have no interest for it to come out, and nobody knows exactly. And we just know that money was given, and Sepp Blatter, the 79-year-old FIFA president, says that the World Cup should be in Qatar. And many people think the problem of world football is actually Sepp Blatter and the organization that many people think, the old guard that many people view as very, very corrupt. Now in Qatar, it's not, forget about the bribery. It's a country with no human rights, no women's rights, no gay rights, and above all that,
no air conditioning.
Like, no, there will be great air conditioning, but the temperature is going to be like 50 degrees Celsius, which is absolutely crazy.
How can they play?
Now Qatar, because they will just design. That's another problem. They're building all those new stadiums, and they bring in some foreign workers that in some investigative reporting found out that a lot of those people are actually modern slaves.
Yeah, dying on the job.
Yeah. So the stadiums will be fabulous, and the air conditioning will be fabulous.
Aren't they planning that the Vagina Stadium? It's shaped.
I wouldn't call it like that in Qatar, but yeah, it's gonna be very glitzy, ritzy, you know, event. But still, there is a chance that actually it will be taken away from Qatar, because the people who are running against Sepp Blatter for FIFA presidency, a lot of them, that's their bid. They say we don't want it in Qatar. Well, but it will be very, very difficult, because so much money was already invested in building the infrastructure.
There's still time to follow this until 2022. Yoav, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Let's move on now to the editor of the Culture magazine. Avri Rosen-Tzvi is here.
Good morning,
it's nice to make your acquaintance, Avri.
Hello. You know, hearing about the Qatar thing, I can't help but remember the wonderful piece that John Oliver did about FIFA.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole corruption thing in there. It's just a wonderful organization all around, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful game.
Yeah, the
beautiful game. But whenever there's such a confluence of money and, you know, and money and money, basically.
It's money and money.
It's money and money. It's like Qatar has money and FIFA has money and like they're shaking hands together.
Yeah. Let's move on to a subject that money has no play in. Movies and the Oscars. I mean, nobody bought an Oscar ever.
It's just art.
Harvey Weinstein never spent a dime trying to get a movie an Oscar.
Soon we're going to hear about all the financial issues that have to do with this you know, this award season, you know, how much it can give a movie a bump and how studios crave it. You know, for the actors, it's prestige, it's recognition, but for the studios, it's money in the bank. You know, it's
Is it though? Is it? I mean,
it's not worth. Let's say it's a gamble. You know, they put in millions and millions of dollars, and only one will benefit. You know, only one movie will benefit from this. But they're talking about all of them. I mean, there are 8 movies right now nominated, and all of them have, you know, conversation around them. You know, I thought that when
who's in the running, who are the favorites?
Well, the favorites are Birdman. Everybody's talking about Birdman.
Alejandro González Iñárritu's pretty incredible film.
Yes, I mean, personally, I didn't care for it. I didn't like it. But it's an amazing film. It's a tour de force, especially for Michael Keaton.
You know, let's watch a report on the Oscar predictions. Come back to you.
He's the most wanted man in Hollywood, Oscar, and studios are going to the extreme to get their hands on him. From billboards aimed at getting the Academy's attention to never-ending ads and lavish parties, the studios pulling out all the stops to promote their films. The stars are also out in full force, touting their flicks in interviews.
I don't know whether to call you Batman or Birdman. I'll just call you Michael. All right.
And on red carpets.
It's an amazingly surprising movie.
When it comes to the price of these publicity campaigns, the sky is the limit. By one estimate, Hollywood will spend over $100 million to secure an Oscar. That's only worth about $400. These campaigns aren't just about winning one of those coveted gold statues. This is also about winning big bucks.
Oscars help legitimize studios, so as many awards as they can win, that can mean bigger projects in the future, bigger stars wanting to work with them, and ultimately more money.
But the biggest payoff is perhaps in reputation.
The campaigning goes beyond just getting that statuette. It's also about bragging rights, it's about ego, it's about which studio produces the best film.
And in this town, earning that prestige is priceless. Mary Bruce, ABC News, Hollywood.
All right, so obviously everybody wants an Oscar. Tell me who's going to get it.
Well, like we said, we think Birdman, Boyhood might be a surprise. I think in a conversation a few days ago, we discussed the fact that like patriotism will take over and American Sniper will sort of swoop in and take it.
Even though it's not just Americans in the Academy?
Well, yeah, but it's mostly, you know, seeing this story.
I don't think it's going to take film. I mean, Clint Eastwood isn't even nominated as director. I think if American Sniper gets anything, it'll be Bradley Cooper, which will be a surprise.
It will still be a surprise. And screenplay it might get, but which is the award that they give to movies they really like, but they can't quite bring themselves to give it the film. But you know, we have to remember that the people who vote for the Oscars are part of the community. You know, there are filmmakers and actors, and they are very influenced by what's going around. If a movie is talked about as being very good, some people will say
we'll vote for it without even watching.
Without watching it, and some people will go against it and say, if everyone's voting for that film, I'll vote for the little guy. Yeah. So it's hard to predict.
I read some article the other day that the people who are actually voting are the housekeepers of the Academy members.
Really?
You know, they're getting the
ballots.
The ballot. They're filling it out and sending it in.
So shouldn't we see a lot more Latinos winners then? I don't think
that's actually part of the problem in this year, right? That there aren't
a lot
any
of
minorities.
white men. Yeah, we just talked about racism, horrible racism with
in
Chelsea
sports,
fans.
right.
We're talking about racism in the Oscars as well because
there was a film that could, I mean,
and it's very surprising because we have to remember most of these people are liberals. You would think that they would want to honor, at least to seem very liberal, to honor this movie. The movie is nominated. Right. But the star, David Oyelowo, is not nominated for, by all accounts, a wonderful performance as Martin Luther King. He's a British actor. That might be part of it. Maybe they don't like British actors taking the parts of Americans. But I think the important thing to remember is, first of all, the biggest surprise in an Oscar in all the Oscar ceremonies for me is that there are no surprises. It's always the movies that you think are gonna win wins, and if something that you didn't think of, then you realize that that's what you should have thought that's gonna win, because it's like it's so obvious.
How did I not see this?
Yeah, they always go for the obvious choice.
It's definitely gonna be Julianne Moore would still. She's been taking home all of the awards.
Probably
so far.
Michael Keaton. There are a lot of actors, surprising people. We're talking about Eddie Redmayne for Theory of Everything, which is not such a good movie.
That's beyond me. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really didn't like that movie.
But the supporting actors can be a surprise. We have J.K. Simmons.
Anyone, but if it's not J.K. Simmons,
no, but
I
know you're gonna be.
Ethan Hawke was amazing in Boyhood. Also.
Yeah, but come on, have you seen Whiplash?
Yeah.
I love the film. It's a lot of fun, and I think J.K. Simmons. I mean, Boyhood is incredible. Don't get me wrong. It's an amazing. It's a once in a
for sure.
in a generation.
Yeah.
It's literally once in a generation.
It's a cinematic event.
It really is. But J.K. Simmons in Whiplash was so good.
I think we might be seeing an interesting split, though. I'm like my personal feeling is that we might have Boyhood take film and Inarritu take director because of the wonderful
My mind is on Linklater, though.
Really?
It is.
It's an interesting, but I fear that in the sweep of Birdman, Edward Norton might take it away from J.K. Simmons. That's my personal fear.
Avi, thanks so much. We'll wait and see. There is an Oscar special coming up on Sunday with.
Certainly is.
Here, there's a nice
familiar face.
A nice host doing that. Thank you, Yoav, as well. Thanks to you at home for watching. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow with another edition. Until then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and watch our shows on i24news.tv. And we'll see you all again tomorrow.